continue with government macroeconomic intervention. There's no way we want to talk about government intervention without coming back to talk about a mixed economy. And because it happens to be a mixed economy, it simply means we have both the private sector and the public sector determining what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. So since the presence in the economy is about both the private sector and the public sector, there will be a time inefficiency will drive either the private sector to the public sector or the public sector towards the private sector. And that is where we have nationalization and privatization. So today's topic is about how prices and outputs are determined in the private sector through privatization or nationalization. So what is nationalization? Nationalization simply means the transfer of private sector businesses to become state-owned. Okay, I have it here. So we call it nationalization because it simply means private-owned businesses become state-owned enterprises. Now, the control has left in the hands of the private individuals, the private businesses, to be owned by the government. That's what nationalization is. Do we get nationalization again? So, nationalization is the transfer of the private sector businesses into the control of the public sector. So, it becomes state-owned. Nationalization. Under nationalization, the government controls price and output. So, because it's nationalization, prices and outputs is determined by the government. For public goods, which is social welfare, often leading to lower prices, higher output or potential inefficiency. So, the point about nationalization is that prices are expected to fall, output are expected to rise, but there might be what? Inefficiency. And most of the time we have inefficiency in the public sector or during nationalization because they lack innovative decisions. They don't think about innovation because there's no profit motive. It's only when you think about making profit that it comes to your mind on how to be innovative. Do you understand the point there? So nationalization, that's the problem about nationalization, potential inefficiency. Then we go to privatization. Why do we call it privatization? We call it privatization because it is a transfer of state-owned businesses to the hands of privatization is state-owned businesses to the hands of individuals or private businesses. So we call it privatization because it becomes private ownership. It is nationalization because it is state-owned or public ownership. Do we get the difference between nationalization and privatization?
Yes.
Privatization, state or private-owned businesses. Nationalization, state-owned businesses. So under privatization, private owners set prices and output, unlike nationalization, which is set by government. For profit drive efficiency, innovation, and lower cost, but with higher prices reduce output, mostly because of monopoly, if not regulated by the government. So the private sector, because of their drive, the motive behind them is profit maximization. And to really maximize profit, you have to be the only one producing goods and services. Because when you are the only one producing goods and services, you'll be able to maximize your profit because you produce where MC goes to your MR. So most of the time, the private sector, without government regulating them, they want to become monopoly. And when they become monopoly, customers become vulnerable to them. So that's why I wrote here, if not regulated by government, prices will be higher, output will be what? Reduced. Because they will try to become what? A monopoly. Do you get it? Does it make sense? Great. So this will lead to lower prices, higher output, or potential harm to consumers and employees. So if government regulates them, with government regulation, prices become lower, output are expected to rise. But who are those that are going to be affected? Employees and consumers. How will employees be affected when government regulates? Employees might be affected if there's government regulation because products might lack quality. Oh, sorry, I'm talking about consumers. Product might lack quality. So they will produce cheap products for lower prices. So the quality of goods and services consumers will be consuming would not be as it's supposed to be because of government regulation and lower prices.
By quality, I feel you mean expectations for the consumer.
Quality means meeting the expectation of consumers. But here we're talking about the action of government, which means about the reaction of the firms. So the private sector businesses might not want to produce high quality products based on the fact that the government eyes are on them to set a lower price. And whatever they produce, governments are not economists. They are not technocrats. They don't know the quality. They can only talk about price. They can set the maximum price, the minimum price, but they don't know what the private sector produces. They don't have information. So government might lack information to know the kind of content the private firms are using for production. So consumers might be buying a cheaper product, but with that lacks quality. Government might regulate, yes, but government do not have the know-how of what happens in the private sector. They only have access to the information the private sector is giving to them. Do you get the point here?
Yeah.
So it simply means there's government failure. Lack of information, asymmetric information. So there's going to be government failure, despite the fact that government is regulating. Do you get the point here?
Yes.
And for employees, how does it cause harm for employees? It causes harm for employees because employees might be cut short in terms of their wages. Because as soon as firms are not able to maximize their profit, they might have to cut short the numbers of employees they have, or reduce their wages, or not wanting to employ more workers. So this is how it affects employees. Do we understand?
Yes.
Great. So we go to privatization itself. Privatization simply means private ownership. So what is the objective? What is the objective of a private ownership? Profit maximization. That's the objective. To maximize profit, which is MC equals to MR. Price and output. The aim is to produce where MC equals to MR, resulting into higher prices, lower output without regulation. Without government regulation, without government intervention, prices will be higher, output will be lower for the private ownership businesses. Do we understand? Efficiency. There's efficiency in the private sector. Why? Because there's the motive to make profit. And to make profit, you have to be productive, efficient. There's efficiency in the private sector because there's competition in the private sector. And for you to compete with others, you have to be more efficient. Do you understand? So the private sector, this implies to cut cost cutting through labor. So the private sector might reduce the numbers of workers they have. They also have to be productive, efficient due to increasing competition and the profit motive. To make profit, sometimes you don't have to increase the price. You just have to be productive, efficient. So these are the reasons why in the private sector, they are mostly efficient more than the public sector. The consumer impacts. Consumers are expected to be worse off without government regulation because one, prices will be higher, quality might not be as better as possible, and the quantity, the choice available for consumers will be less. Because remember, in the private sector or privatization, they want to think about what? Monopoly. And when there's monopoly, it means choices for consumers are reducing. So with privatization, mostly consumers might be worse off without government regulation. Do we get it?
Yes.
So that's about consumer impacts when it comes to privatization. Now, let's go to nationalization. What is the objective of nationalization? What is the objective of government taking over private sector businesses that are not efficient? Provision of public goods and social welfare. Government wants to provide goods that the private sector will not be able to produce. Do we get it? Prices and output. Government wants to produce, the prices are set where marginal customers will pay. For MC, for the public sector, it is MC cost to pay. For the private sector, it is MC cost to what? MR. So government will produce large quantities, extra quantities at the same price, or even lower the price to allow consumers to buy. But the firms they produce extra units to make extra revenue. Do you understand?
Yeah.
But here, marginal cost is equal to market price, which simply means government is taking charge, government is paying more. The cost of producing is higher than the price. The cost of producing extra unit is higher than the price. So you're going to buy the same price as previously. Do you understand?
Yes.
So government tries to lower the price, unlike the private sector. The private sector would not lower the price, they would rather increase the price. And that's why they produce where MC equals to MR. But for government, they will produce where MC equals to P. Do we get it? Great. Efficiency. Potential inefficiency due to lack of innovation, lack of innovation of political interference. In the public sector, there is no motive for profit maximization. That makes it not to be innovative. They don't think about coming up with innovative ideas. They don't need it. There's no motive for profit. That's one of the reasons that they are inefficient. There's no competition. It is government owned. Government controls the economy. So there's no innovative idea. There's no reason to be innovative. That's one. Also, they might suffer from political interference. When new government comes, they come up with new policy. New government, new dispensation, new policy. And these things affect the up and running of the organization owned by the government. If a new government comes today, the general electric company manager might be sacked or kicked out for a new one. So there is always going to be hiccups in between.
It could be what?
Hiccups. Like, up and down. Do we understand? So there's no, because the private sector, there's consistency in the private sector. But in the public sector, there's no consistency. Because the public sector is controlled by the government of the day.
Yeah. Also, sometimes, for example, especially during the election years, for example, a candidate might say, oh, when I become president, I'm going to give everyone free goodies, whatever. So this will obviously also cause that.
Yes, so the public sector is politically, managed mostly, and this brings about inefficiency. Yeah, do you understand? So that is efficiency, and the impact on consumers. Consumers are expected to be better off. Why? Because goods are produced for their social welfare, but in return, they might have to pay more taxes, because whatever government is spending on, it is from the taxpayer money.
Or
what?
Or debt instruments.
Do we get it? So governments would provide public financing, but the revenue is generated through taxation. So consumers will have lower prices, but might have to pay more tax in return. So that's prices and output when it comes to privatization and nationalization. Any question?
No.